Okay, good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Patrick Walsh and I am the chair of this committee. A few housekeeping points before we begin. This meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. By participating, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me to my right. Officers will direct you to the assembly point on Riverside Gardens. Please can officers and guests introduce themselves when they first address the committee, and would everybody please make sure to speak into the microphones. So moving along to item 1, and we have apologies from absence from Councillor Nimmo. We also have apologies for lateness from Councillor Pascal Tilbury. Additionally, we do have apologies from Sukhvinder Kelsey, the Chief Executive, Director of Finance and Corporate Services, as well as from David Hughes, Director of Audit, Fraud and Risk, who will be joining us this evening remotely. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any?
Walsh, sorry to bother you. It's I think you meant to say executive director rather than chief executive.
Yes, indeed I did. I said not to undermine
I do apologise.
Yes, not to undermine our indeed CEO. Apologies for that. Freudian slip. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? Okay. Hearing none, I move to item 3. Do members agree the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 1st of December 2025 as a true and accurate reflection?
Yeah, just one question. I think it's page 9, paragraph 5, penultimate paragraph. It says avoid property that has been let for 6 years. It should, of course, be unlet for 6 years.
Certainly, if that could be noted for correction. Thank you. Are there any additional corrections or matters arising? Okay, in that case, I will take it as agreed. And ordering of the agenda. Do members agree to discuss item 8, the cybersecurity arrangements first before proceeding to other items? Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, thank you. We now return to the agenda. So we now move to item 4, the external audit plan and audit risk assessment for 25-26 for the council audit. And can I ask James Newman to say a few words before members receive the report? And also joining James on this item is going to be Paul Cuttle, Andy Conlon from Grant Thornton, who is our external auditor, to brief us on this report. So, James, over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to welcome Paul and Andy from Grant Thornton here this evening to talk through the external auditor's plan for the 25-26 accounts. Just for a bit of context, the draft 25-26 account publication deadline, so on our side, is the 30th of June. And whilst the deadline kind of links to the backstop date of 31st of January 2027, we're hoping to get things done considerably sooner than that, as Paul and Andy will explain in a minute. On the council side, in terms of getting the draft accounts done, we've got a timetable in place. Obviously, it's a fairly well-oiled machine, and we're just processes happening as usual, really. And as Paul's going to explain, the plan presented here covers the main audit, the annual auditor's report, previously known as the VFM opinion, and that has to be done coterminous with the main audit now, plus the pension fund accounts. So I'm going to hand over to Paul and Andy just to talk you through a bit more of the detail.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'll take the reports as read. I think probably the bits to add are that it's a big report, but that's largely because auditing standards require us to communicate various things to you as a committee. So there's a lot in here in terms of the bits I'd probably draw out. It's probably to reiterate some of the points in the headlines and the introduction section of the report early on, which is to say that in terms of our planning work has been undertaken, our risk assessments. I think our view of what are the significant risks in the areas we're going to focus on are articulated in this report, and it's consistent with the things that we've looked at in previous years. So we've obviously focused a lot around the valuation of land and buildings and the pension fund asset liability due to their sizes and complexity, and they're the type of things we'll be focusing on again. There's no real changes in terms of the reporting landscape. So in the last couple of years, we've had new standards come into place. There's nothing like that this year. So I would envisage that, and James already referenced that there's a well-oiled machine in terms from a council's finance team perspective in the preparation of the accounts. We'll be looking to undertake our audit in late June, early July, with an aim of bringing you a audit findings report, hopefully in September, which would allow us to target the statutory deadline, which is still September. James obviously referenced the backstop date. That is in January, and that's the opinion has to be given by that date, but we should be aiming for a much earlier timescale based, I think, on the experiences that we've had in the last few years and the experience of the finance team and the experience of the audit team. Other than that, I don't think there's anything I probably want to draw out from the report, but I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Paul. Do members have any questions they wish to raise? Okay, Councillor Herman.
I've just got one, which is quite a simple one, I think. Do any councils ever get green? We've obviously got a lot of ambers in this report, but there is a green measure. I'm looking particularly at page 45. So I mean, I would have thought that it would be hard to get green because you're always wanting to improve and you're always learning. So I just wondered if any councils ever do get green.
Yeah, so the RAG rating doesn't really, I think it's an attempt by us so that the RAG rating doesn't exist in the code in terms of what so that we're not doing it. We're just trying to apply a bit of a colour scheme to draw out the bits, but actually there would be councils on certain criteria that you would have scenarios where they would have no recommendations, but we would certainly, red would be if we were to identify what's flagged as a key recommendation and a significant weakness, which is terminology in the code, and that's where we've had those in previous years. And then if we have what we call improvement recommendations, which are things that are kind of nice to have, if we've got 2 or 3 of them, we tend to badge it as amber. So green would be if there was nothing. So it's not So double negative, it's not impossible. It's not impossible, but yeah, you could have that scenario.
I'm going to move to our independent member, Charlotte Moore.
Yeah, it was just a comment actually to say I did read every word of this because this is partly why I'm on the committee, and it all looked fine. So good luck. I welcome the ambition of bringing the accounts timetable forward. And actually, I think the local government sector are really lucky to have the VFM reports. I think they're, you know, they're actually really useful and very excellent. So.
Thank you, Charlotte. Is there any other questions? Okay. Obviously, just to say to applaud the work of you guys already. Obviously, appreciate this is quite a task in itself. You see, there is a backstop in there, which obviously does reflect a broader landscape and things that are happening across the country. And obviously, we've been through this a number of times now, so appreciate this. It's great to see that there's capacity, there's structure, and there's order, which is obviously great to see. And obviously, we do look forward to seeing the report in due course. So thank you very much to you all. As there is no further questions, do members, I'm going to move to the recommendation. So do members agree to 1, note the 25-26 external audit plan for the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham at Appendix 1, and 2, the 25-26 informing the audit risk document, which sets out the council's response to inquiries regarding the risks from the external auditor at Appendix 2. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Excellent. In that case, we move to item 5, which is going to be our internal audit progress report for the period of April 25 to February 26. And can I ask Maura Mackey to present on this report? And I believe joining us remotely, I can see him, is going to be David Hughes. And we also have Ray Chitty and Cindy Nick. Apologies, Cindy. I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Cindy Inti Achampon.
Good evening to you. So welcome.
Easy when you know.
Moira, over to you to start.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for also introducing my colleagues. Cindy's the audit manager who works with me and has worked with me for a number of years. So the report here is the progress to date. We had last reported, I'm trying to remember, it must have been up to about September time, wasn't it? Yeah. It was still a lot of work in progress there. We've obviously moved on a bit from that with 6 reports finalised. Pleasing to note that 2 of them were substantial assurance, both of which are in the housing area. And Richard's here if anyone wants to talk about those audits in any detail, but they were quite detailed pieces of work in very key areas of the council. We had 1 limited assurance. It was a school. I'm assured from the school's response that actually the actions have already been taken. They were a little bit slow coming back to us on that because I think they thought they had to do everything before they replied to us, but we've been working with them and we'll be doing follow-up pretty much straight away. So we don't have any major concerns about that. A number of reports still are in draft, which will be finalised imminently. Quite a few pieces of work in progress. We did have some slight delays because of the cyber incident, mainly because people were busy doing other things and having to do things differently. So I think we just had to be mindful of that. Very positive note, recommendations, very good implementation rate on that. We did a lot of follow-up work in the last period, and those that are not fully implemented yet are on the way. So we're very pleased with that. We are now just finishing off the last bit of the plan. There will be some, we've noted down where we've had to move things around a little bit, and there may be some things that drop off and have to go into next year, but there'll be explanations for all of those, either in this report or at the end of the year when we get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Maura. Do members of the committee have any questions that they wish to raise?
Okay.
Yes, Councillor Morton.
Under audits removed from the plan, you've got Avonmore Primary School, which is still in existence, but has obviously moved to another location. I mean, it's still in existence. It's part of the Fox Federation. So can you just give a bit more detail as to why it's been removed?
The timing wasn't right, to be perfectly honest. When we first planned the audit, it hadn't long since been moved, and we have to schedule in quite a lot of work for the schools over a period of time, and it just wouldn't have been feasible to fit it in at the tail end of the year. It's in next year's plan, I can confirm.
Councillor Homan.
Yeah, can I pick up on the issue of building control? And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that, because this is something that residents quite often raise with councillors. And I can see that there is an issue about some higher risk buildings, but I know that similarly, building control can't be all things to all people, which I think sometimes what our residents expect. So I've just wondered if there's a little bit more information you can provide on that. Page 83. Yep.
Sorry.
It was a satisfactory.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
I wasn't, I don't feel that there was anything significant that came out of that audit. It was a very good audit, actually. There's a lot more regulation, obviously, in that area. And they've done a lot of work to improve the number of the resources they have to deal with the building control process. So I was quite pleased with that as an outcome. I mean, I haven't got the full details with me, but if there's anything particular, we did not find that there was any major issues with that.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because your residents do quite often raise building safety in all sorts of guises, so that's why I wondered.
I'm going to move to the independent member, Charlotte Moore.
Thanks. So I just wanted to ask about St Mary's. Just a quick question, was it picked because of a known risk or randomly?
It was due for audit. We have a cycle that we look at the schools.
Okay, because I suppose that what you found within the limited assurance are quite a number of quite serious, quite basic things. So I suppose my question then is, did they know they'd got a problem? And if they knew they'd got a problem, did they tell us and ask for some help or advice or what have you, rather than sort of waiting for the audit to tell them they've got a problem?
So as I say, they're done on a cycle. We liaise very closely with the school's finance team and the governance team to prioritise when we do the audits. And this particular one, they asked us to do sooner rather than later, because they were already working with them to address a number of issues at the school which needed to be addressed. So it wasn't a surprise that it came out how it did. And the school's finance support actually have been working with the school to improve things as well. They had some changes in staffing, which was part of the problem, and things couldn't be found, or things hadn't been done quite as they were expected.
Right,
but
that'd be reassuring. They did know and they asked.
Yeah.
There were two limited assurance audits last year, client affairs and no recourse to public funds. Will we have follow-ups on those prior to the year-end opinion to know whether those control weaknesses have now been addressed?
Yes, so on the client affairs audit, we were hoping to start something on that in January. We have, there was a bit of a delay because the people who actually look after that area are within finance, and finance were quite badly impacted by the cyber incident, and they need to do some catching up and do things slightly differently, not necessarily about client affairs, but the staff had to do things differently. I was talking to James last week, and James is going to be checking that things are on track so that we can now go in and do the follow-up on that area.
Nothing more to add, really. I think I'll just come back to Moira with an appropriate time, but I think I think it's imminent. It's not far away, so it's not. Yeah, we'll be able to do that. It's the same staff who do the direct payments audit as well, and that's part of the concept. So we'll finalise the client affairs one, then move on to the direct payments one. So that is just a kind of lining stuff up. So yeah.
On the no recourse to public funds, we plan to do that in Q3, which obviously ended in December. From our own point of view, we had to do juggle things around a little bit. So we will get that one scheduled in as well, so that you get a response to that before the end of the financial year. It'll be in the annual report. Yeah.
That'd be helpful. And then the final one was just business continuity. I understand there was an advisory audit with a number of recommendations last year. Given that we've been having discussions about the need for effective business continuity arrangements, I just wondered again when you're going to follow up on those actions.
So I had an informal follow-up conversation with the head of the business continuity area, and I was fairly confident that we were moving in a really good way. I was about to sort of progress that when we had the cyber incident. So what we've decided to do this year, in next year, very early next year, is to have conversations across the organisation to find out how effective it actually was in the real world when they actually did have an incident, how effective the plans were, what they've learned from it, because there's always learning. But, you know, I had a conversation actually with Richard completely separately about an audit, and he gave me lots of confidence that his plans were there, available, and they worked. So I'd like to get that, obviously, from doing the follow-up. But generally speaking, we are fairly confident that the actions that were in the original audit have been taken.
Yes, Sharon.
So having business continuity plans and having documents and being able to access them is only part of the story. You have to practice them. So the exercises that we do with our emergency planning team, and we choose things that are likely to happen, I guess. And that's why last year, in the same year of the incident, we did that senior leadership. Theme, you're now relying on your business continuity plans. You have no digital. Systems are down. What are you doing? So it made those come to life, because in my experience, the best of people that do their business continuity plans and are really good at keeping them up to date, then when they need them, and they need them in a live situation, and you only get that through testing. It's a really important part of emergency planning. You always think you've got your plan until the situation happens.
So I was going to say that's absolutely excellent. And the next thing to do is pretend the whole of the leadership team and everyone who reports to them are on holiday, and then say, right, all the systems are down. What are you going to do? Because
I'm going to invite David Hughes to speak. I understand David is looking to speak on this.
I was just going to back up what Sharon was saying there, Chair. Apologies, you can't see me, but I think the importance of that regular testing, which is done with all the senior leadership, is really important to make sure that those business continuity plans that are on paper or on electronic form actually do work, and that services can continue to function. I think what was really good to see Hammersmith and Fulham was very much the case. So some of the areas like Moira mentioned around finance, for example, were down to third-party providers, where there was a delay in getting access back to systems, but obviously the council itself was getting up to speed quite quickly after the incident to make sure services continue to be provided. So I think that's something that we want to pick up on in the audit we do early in the new financial year, and to feed back on those lessons learned, and to make sure those recommendations that we'd made last time were incorporated as well.
Thank you, David. I'm going to bring in now Councillor Pascal Tilbury.
Thank you very much. Just a quick one from me. Ooh, that's exciting. On progress made around the new housing voids. I know that this was something that was due to be picked up after Q4 last year. And so just wondering how things are progressing with that.
Thank you, Councillor. For everybody to know, my name's Richard Schwer. I'm the Executive Director of Housing and Neighbourhoods. So void management is actually progressing. I think it's the area of work which we've done quite a lot over the last 3 years, especially over the last year, where the key-to-key operation is actually now within the parameters of what a good housing service should be operating. We now know what we are expecting with all the officers. we're actually working with residents about what we need to do. When I first came into the authority looking after housing, we were roughly in the region of roughly 550 odd voids. We're now in the tune of roughly about 80 voids, and those 80 voids are voids which are being turned over on a regular basis. So hopefully that explains what we're actually undertaking. I'm happy to go forwards in the next year to have a voids audit to show the journey of improvement, what the service has undertaken.
Thank you, Councillor. Maura, I did just have one question for myself. Schools has come up a number of years now, and it always does seem to be the schools that are somewhat struggling with their own internal audit. And if I'm right in saying that it tends to be because of quite frequent staff turnover. Obviously, I know you've tried to help with best practice and explaining the process to people, but is there any other practices that you've seen elsewhere that could help with establishing that best practice? Because I think you alluded to earlier in the questioning that, again, there's recurring issues about people not quite understanding the process, people not being able to find things because, some people have passed on, people have different filing systems. I suppose what I'm trying to get to here is there more structures that are needed, or have you been able to kind of really get to the root of that particular problem? I appreciate I'm asking you quite a large question there.
A lot of the schools now have federated with other schools, which I think has helped in some ways, although obviously it means a lot of sharing that's going on. And it can mean that the staff are shared on different days at different sites, etc. But you do tend to find that there's a bit more, maybe some experience. They're used to doing it somewhere else, and they can bring that good practice to a school. We tend to find similar things at schools, which could be, keeping an eye on your suppliers. So if you've got contracts, making sure you look at them, get the governors to check them to make sure you're actually getting good value for money, that you still actually need that service that you spec'd 5 years ago. That those are the sort of things that, and to be fair, the schools obviously have a lot to do. And it's another thing to think about. But I think the governance team also work quite closely with the governor's side to make sure that they ask the right questions of the school and the heads and the business managers to make sure that they are aware of the budgets, they're aware of when they've got struggles and where they've got staffing issues. As I say, this particular school, it was known. They wanted us to go in, and it wasn't a big surprise that there were a number of things there, but they totally embraced what we asked them to do. And as I say, we could probably, I think if we're following up now, we would find that they've done everything we wanted. So as I say, there are common themes, and we do encourage people to share. And I actually went to a school business managers forum back last summer here, which was really interesting to hear different perspectives on it and how they were all very welcoming of the audit, adding to not adding to their workload, but adding to their control processes.
So I think it's say that it is about trying to learn the best practice and its implementation. Is there? Oh, David again. David.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to what Maura said there, I think that relationship with the school's finance team and the school business managers are really important. Something we've done in the past, which I think we'll look at doing again, is to provide some summary guidance to schools. So what we take the last year or two's worth of audit results, anonymise them, and show schools what best practice looks like and where areas that we often find need for improvement. So in the past, we've shared that with school head teachers and school business managers, but also chairs of governors, so that governing bodies have also got the questions to be able to ask their sort of senior management in the school to make sure that they're cited and aware of the kind of things we'll be looking for when an audit comes along.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, David. If there is no further questions on this report, do members agree to note the report?
Agree.
Excellent. So moving along then to item 6 and staying with yourselves, for the internal audit plan of 26-27. Moira, David, Ray, and Cindy will be speaking on this item as well. So Moira, over to yourself again.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Chair. We've prepared a very early draft of the audit plan for next year. As in previous years, we're only really focused on the first quarter. So the audits that are identified in the first quarter, we're fairly confident that that's what we will be doing. Some of them may be because they've been pushed from another year, but others we just know that's what's happening. We've got some ideas of things that we want to do in the rest of the year. We are still consulting with the departments. It's, you know, we need to have a really much bigger understanding about what's happening, what their risks are, what their concerns are. So some of that might change a little bit before we get to that. Before we get to quarter two, we will have had those conversations and it'll be a little bit clearer for quarter two and maybe a little bit more clearer for quarters 3 to 4. So it is an ongoing process. So we've had some of the meetings, we've still got some to have. It's just a question of timing and actually being able to get into the DMTs and talk to them. But as I say, we obviously consider the risks, the council's risks generally, and also some cyclical work that we have to do, which, you know, we choose to do. We also have attached for you is our strategic plan, which shows what we'd like to cover in different areas over a period of time. We do refer to that as well, and if we feel that we haven't looked at a particular area, whether or not it's high, you know, whatever its risk is, we will look to see whether or not we ought to be looking at it, if there may have been something that's changed. So we do refer to that as well. It is, as I say, it's an ongoing process, and we are still in that process. But the quarter one is pretty much where I think it will be, bar some inevitable things. You get last minute Ofsted have arrived, or the CQC, or you just don't know sometimes, and we just have to move things. In fact, we were about to do a transitions audit this year, and an inspection happened, and we've now actually removed that audit because it's been covered by the inspection, so it would have been a duplication of effort. So we try to be mindful of that and don't duplicate things as well.
David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add to what Moira said there, I mean, we've been taking this flexible approach to audit planning since after the COVID pandemic, and we found it has a number of benefits both for us and for the services. So because we're agreeing, the next quarter's audits, we get much better engagement when it comes to the audits being undertaken, which is really good. But we're also able to be a lot more flexible in terms of responding to changes in requirements, changes in risks, which means that we can then, adapt the plan to suit the emerging risks, which is really important. We have obviously in our mind the strategic 3-year plan to make sure we're trying to cover bases across the piece. But I think this sort of flexible approach really does help us to get the best out of the audit team, but also provide the best assurance of the kind of key areas that management are also focused on, as well as the ones we know we want to look at as well. So it's very much a dialogue between ourselves and management to make sure we get that good balance in the audit plan.
Thank you, David. Do members of the committee have any questions they wish to raise? The independent member, Charlotte Moore.
Thanks, Moira. So I thought this all looked very sensible. My one question was digital, which says to be confirmed. So you may say that digital have been very busy dealing with a cyber incident, but I suppose my pushback would be, well, if that means that they're deprioritising conversations about internal audit, what else is potentially being deprioritised, and therefore what risks have we got through that? It's, for me, it's almost more of a reason to go in and say, can we really be explicit about what has slowed or been deprioritised?
Yes, so yes, there is an impact of the cyber incident, but it's also a resourcing thing. So what happened was we were planning to go and talk to the digital team around about the early part of quarter 4, and we did this previously. We had a 3-year plan, which we would then look at again before the year started to make sure it was still relevant. And we got to the end of that 3 years, and we were due to go in and talk to the digital team, and it just wasn't appropriate, but it was also the resources that we used to do that were all booked up. By the time it was convenient to have the conversation, they were all booked up on other work, and we were also renewing a contract. So it's all a bit of a timing thing, but they are coming in early in Q1 to plan the work for the rest of the year and potentially for the next couple of years. But we need to have our specialist auditors to have that conversation.
Joanne.
So I'll just reiterate what I said earlier in the meeting. The work that we did with Audit last year was valuable to us as a service, and we would continue to work with Moira and the team to ensure that we have that on an ongoing basis. We have a whole set of areas that we're quite happy to work with colleagues on. We're just waiting for the resource to be available. So we know that there's lots that we want to have checked, and we know the value that Audit adds to that work.
Thank you for that. I think it's worth something to be noted for future reports as we go into 2026 is that while there may be variation, there may be some delays, this is a considered and proportionate response to the needs of the organization. And that is why, so obviously, while there may be delays in a future report or certain limitations, obviously appreciate that might be a sensitive way to write that, but that may be necessary. So thank you for that. Is there any other questions that people wish to raise? Okay. Yeah.
So can I just add to that I say it was very much a timing thing. If it had been last year, we already had a fair idea of what was going to be in the plan because we'd done this 3-year cycle. But it needed refreshing, and that was the whole thing. We needed to go out, have the conversations, and the timing was just not good to do that.
I think that's really helpful. Since we've seen the 3-year plan for all the other areas at the next. No, I know, sorry, that's what I'm saying. So when you bring the update on the plan, it would be helpful also to bring in the 3-year digital plan. So we've had the same look ahead on that as we have had on the other areas, if that's right.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move to the recommendations. And do members agree to note? And the first note is the audit work due to be undertaken in early draft for 26-27 audit plan as set out in Appendix 1. And note 2, the persistent risk that the council faced is set out in the strategic audit plan at Appendix 2. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. I'm now move to item 7, which is the risk management update. And could I ask David Hughes to brief us on this? Also attending on this item is Jules. Yep. So David, over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep my introduction brief because I think there's some problems with the sound. So this report follows on from the Q2 report back in October last year. So we're now presenting the risk register at Q4, which SLT Assurance reviewed earlier this month. So we'd recognise, as before, that many of the risks on the register are long-term risks, and the changes in score are often quite slow to move. But it's not to say that risks are not being actively managed, but there are some where scores are unlikely to reduce given their nature. So, for example, the cyber risk, which we've been talking about earlier. We'd recognise as well there's now a period of further global uncertainty, which will have an impact on availability and cost of resources, such as fuel. So SLT Assurance will be keeping a close eye on the impact of the conflict and what it's having on the cost of delivering services and the impact on residents, as well as ensuring that risk mitigations across the board are in place and having the desired effect. So between these meetings, we are doing lots of work, Jules and I, to make sure that risks, either in terms of corporate risks or program risks, are being effectively managed. So really happy to take any questions along with Jules and colleagues in the room around the risk register. And if the committee want to look at future topics for briefings or deep dives on specific risks, we'd welcome any suggestions in that vein as well.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Jules, anything from yourself?
I think the main point is to pick up that there are only 2 risks that there have been any sort of significant change. We've obviously paid reference to risk number 3 as an exempt item. The other area is risk 19, which is we continue to look at the monitor and manage the impact of fair funding reforms announced by the government. Overall, as David said, the nature of these corporate risks is because they present a potential existential threat to the council. They don't tend to move. As long as we monitor them with an objective to reduce them, then there will be no significant change.
Thank you, Jules. So do members of the committee have any questions that they wish to ask? The independent member, Charlotte Moore.
Thanks. So I really like the new format of the risk register. I wanted to ask about risk 18, which is management of complaints, requests for information, member inquiries are not completed according to our target timescales. Because I buy what you're saying around some risks are long term and, you know, you manage them over time, like security. I don't really buy that for management complaints and requests for information. And actually the annual complaints report says that you want to improve to the stage where you are delivering within your timescales. So I suppose my question was, are we confident in the action plan, the timescales for actually when that risk will come back within tolerance? Because that is one that should be within tolerance. It's not like cybersecurity.
Chair, I'm looking after this at the minute, so that's something which I believe, Charlotte, we're going to be having a discussion later on this week with David. I think we've got some time in to look at complaint management, so I can reply about what we're doing and how we're managing it, if that makes sense.
I think, Richard, we're changing, we'll move that meeting on, but I think Charlotte, to help reassure you, SLT Assurance, we have regular information there about the way complaints is being managed across the authority. Sharon chairs a weekly complaints improvement board. Now, we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years the way in which complaints management has improved, and particularly in housing in Richard's area. So lots of good work has been done in housing to drive down the timescales around complaints, the number of complaints that move from stage 1 to stage 2 and to ombudsman. So again, lots of positive direction of travel there, but I'm sure Sharon as well, is in the room, will want to talk about the good work being done there along with Richard and colleagues.
Sharon, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. So probably it would be fair to say in response to the independent person that this really is not at the same level as the financial challenges or indeed cyber, and probably hasn't been for a while. It's just that it was a preoccupation of mine as I sought improvement, and I hadn't returned to adjust the high level of rating while I've got it in my sights. But what I can say is there has been a complete change of approach in Hammersmith and Fulham to complaint handling, and what we do is in line with the Ombudsman's complaint handling code, and we welcome complaints and we're very accessible to complaints because it helps us to understand where in our very diverse services, not many organisations are as diverse as a local authority when it comes to types of service, from elderly care to housing to highways to parking. We're very rich in the tapestry of the things that could go wrong and the things that you constantly need to improve upon. And I've always treated this as very, very important on management teams. I expect management teams to look at the top 10 of things that are going wrong for them and to develop solutions. The housing department's been on a journey. The repair service was causing us a lot of complaints volume-wise. We also had, which other authorities have, which is the people that go door to door knocking to register disrepair. So don't use the complaint system, but go to the no win, no fee lawyer. So if there's any compensation, they'll be taking it. Not a very good idea for our residents. What we've done is we've encouraged those that have come in that route to go into the complaint system. So our complaint system that we've been bringing down number we still have that issue to deal with, and we're dealing with it. So I'm very pleased at the progress that's being made. It's just that when things are important to me, I tend to put them high up on risk registers and the like, because I need the senior leadership team to be as interested as I am in them. So you're very correct in your analysis. This probably shouldn't be there and have been there for as long as it has. But it remains something that I personally am very interested in. And recently we discussed changing the red rating, but I'm sorry, members, it didn't get to this meeting. It's for another time. But that's just the context of it, because we're very, very interested in it and we're always looking to improve. And so we make it a very special topic in Hammersmith and Fulham.
Thank you, Sharon. Is there any further questions that people wish to raise? Charlotte.
Can I just say I found that very reassuring, actually, and it is really evident when you look through the history of the annual complaints reports that there has been significant progress and change. I can see that. I suppose it's just when you look at the heat map and you've got the top three red risks as, you know, cyber, balancing the budget and complaints handling, it tells a slightly odd story. But I think what I'm hearing you saying is the risk may still be red, but it would move away from not responding to complaints within the time scale to not really welcoming and learning from complaints and not maximising the opportunity to improve services to residents. So that might be, sometimes it's reframing it that keeps it as a high risk, but doesn't look like a control weakness. Yeah.
And it probably hasn't been at that level, I suppose. Financial risk, cyber, those sorts of things, they are a game changer for an organisation. We had a preoccupation and with this because reputationally and in the interests of our residents, it was a big priority. So hence placing it there.
Thank you. Sharon, I did have a question, and this actually might be a question for Joanna as well. Just in terms of risk 19, obviously being mindful of current events and also policy changes at the moment. Obviously tonight we discussed a lot about capacities and working through and being adaptable. Obviously right now we're dealing with a certain spike in energy prices, which we may see local authorities being required to disperse funds that are being turned over to them with the expectation of distributing them relatively quickly. Obviously, the risk itself does mention things about the fair funding review, which may also see some changes in terms of funding, but also obligations attached to those fundings and the expectations for the timeline and distribution. I'm not aware of it, but potentially we may get some pride in place funding at some point, which would be lovely to have. But again, that would be with the expectation of delivery and distribution of those funds within a time frame. So I suppose my question is, sticking with the principle of this Council of Ruthless Financial Efficiency, is do you feel that there is capacity still within the financial directorate to disperse and manage any new funding, but also any changes in the way funding is distributed to the council?
Chair, thank you very much for that question. So I also saw the announcement regarding some support to households through the new crisis fund that used to be the household support fund. I think we've got a track record here. When government makes an announcement of distributing to our vulnerable citizens some support, we've got a very good track record of delivery on that. Because very quickly, once an amount of money is identified for Hammersmith and Fulham, you immediately go into a league table, sadly, but it's true. And we have done this very quickly in the past. One of the things that we are really keen to do is if a grant is made available for vulnerable people, that it goes to vulnerable people and we try and eliminate error and fraud. It's so important. All of that stuff in COVID, we didn't go into a race, we still delivered on time, but we made sure that we had bona fide people with a history of being vulnerable to provide grants to. we went that little bit extra because we are bothered about fraud and error. There used to be a situation, if you pay something out in error, then you as a local authority would be paying for that. So that's my background. So I'm very keen to make sure that we do this as swiftly as we can, but making sure we're paying this to the right people is important. You know, the people who need it, who are vulnerable, who meet the criteria. Chair.
Thank you, Sharon. So that's it's excellent here, obviously, that the reassurance is there that funds to vulnerable people will get to where it needs to be. Is there any further questions to members of the committee? Okay, in that case, I'm going to ask, do members agree to note the report?
Agreed.
Excellent. So then we move to item 9, which is dates for future meeting. I do need to look at my phone here to see what the actual dates are. Do members agree to note the dates of future meetings for this committee? So that will be the 23rd of June and the 28th of September. Is that correct? Yeah. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. So finally, before we finish this evening, I understand that this evening is Maura Mackey's final time with us on the committee. So Maura, I'd like to express my thanks, obviously the committee's thanks for your participation throughout this entire term. I understand that you're retiring. So I wish you a very, very happy retirement. Thank you so much for all your time and your effort over this term, obviously in terms gone by as well. I really hope you have a fantastic retirement.